Coming up on Network Africa, the 30th Ordinary Session of the Assembly of the Heads of State and Government of the African Union kicks off with the launch of Single African Air Transport Market. And it's a sad one as not less than 3 people have been killed after a fire broke out in an informal settlement in Kenya's capital, Nairobi. And the South African band Ladysmith Black Mambazo weighing to ground. It's great to have you on the program. I am BC Addis. We'll begin with a look at stories and happenings that made headlines over the weekend.
Mali's President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta on Saturday said his people would not be frightened by attacks after an unidentified gunman killed at least 14 soldiers in a pre-dawn assault on a military camp. According to an army statement read on state radio, a group of about 30 heavily armed fighters attacked the military camp in Sumpi, located in the center of the country near the southern boundary of Mali's Timbuktu region. 15 others were wounded, adding that 17 of the attackers had been killed in the battle. There was no immediate claim of responsibility for the attack. Elsewhere, African leaders arrive at the 30th Ordinary Session of the African Union in Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa, on Sunday. The theme of this year's summit is Winning the Fight Against Corruption, a sustainable path to Africa's transformation. The summit will deliberate on AU's institutional reforms, the state of peace and security on the continent, continental free trade, and open airspace. After a week of simmering unrest following the shootings, Congolese President Joseph Kabila gave his first news conference in 6 years. President Kabila questioned the objectives of the protesters, saying there was misconception and that he's not aware of their grievances. But he offered no firm word on when there could be new elections for president, the issue that has caused a wave of protest against his rule since his mandate expired at the end of 2016. In the same news conference, he rejected charges that his forces had violently broken up pro-democracy protests, stirred by his refusal to step down at the end of his mandate. Scores of people have been killed in the past year in protest organized by the Catholic Church against Kabila's refusal to step down and delays in calling new elections.
Now let's talk about the 30th AU Summit in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, with President Muhammadu Buhari spearheading Africa's quest to tackle corruption, and there are hopes that he could make a significant difference. Delegates at the summit applauded the emergence of the Nigerian president as the driving force behind the effort and asked other leaders to support him.
I pledge that I shall do my very best to ensure that the anti-corruption agenda will receive the attention it deserves.
President Muhammadu Buhari taking on a new challenge at the continental level to spearhead Africa's fight against corruption. It's a role some delegates to the 30th AU Summit believe President Buhari will succeed in.
South Sudan would like to learn from the experience and the roadmap laid by His Excellency President Buhari to fight the corruption in Africa. And corruptions deny opportunity for children to go to schools, deny opportunity to build schools, deny opportunity for us Africans to connect ourselves, deny opportunity for food security in Africa.
I'm sure that he's the person who can really take that responsibility and fight against corruption and show to the rest of Africa the way.
Nigeria's Minister of Justice sees the appointment of Nigeria to lead the fight as an acknowledgement.
It is indeed a very well-deserved commendation, very well-deserved appointment for the international community and indeed the African countries, the African leadership, heads of states and government to acknowledge what Mr. President is doing. And I think the essence is for them to drive from the wisdom that has been put in place by the President in terms of fighting, the fight against corruption.
In his speech at the launch, President Buhari calls for an independent judiciary, strong institutions, and to bring the youth on board.
Fighting corruption
It's not a one-man business. Every Nigerian should follow us, should join in the fight against corruption. You don't have to fight corruption the way I do. Everybody has a style of fighting corruption. Even if you have to educate children at home that corruption is wrong, corruption is evil, it goes a long way.
It is Mr. Magu's position that the fight requires political will and must be fought by all. From Addis Ababa, Ibrahim Adra, Channels Television News.
And staying with the AU summit, President Paul Kagame of Rwanda started his reign as the African Union chairperson, announcing the launch of a single African air transport market. Mr. Kagame told Africa's leaders that by committing to break down these various barriers, it means tremendous signal will be sent in Africa and beyond that it's no longer business as usual. Meanwhile, President Muhammadu Buhari is calling on his colleagues within the continent to adopt a common position and push for change of mindset if the war against corruption is to become a reality.
Corruption is indeed one of the greatest evils of our time. Corruption rewards those who do not play by the rules and also creates a system of distortion and diversion, thereby destroying all efforts of constructive, just, and fair governance. I cannot overemphasize the value of strong institutions. A judiciary which stands firm against arbitrariness and injustice by the executive is a vital pillar in the anti-corruption fight.
Freedom of movement of people in Africa is equally important, and it is achievable in 2018. A single continental market, integrate our infrastructure, and infuse our economies with technology. We will launch the single African air transport market. This is a major step forward for transportation. We are nearly ready to adopt the Continental Free Trade Area,